Muchas gracias. Bien, aunque vamos con retraso, como siempre, tenemos programado un debate al final de esta sesión. Después de este debate está programado también una muy rápida intervención que haré donde explicaré muy brevemente las distintas iniciativas que estamos desarrollando, además del Premio Rafael Manzano. Vamos a tener primero el debate para que no se pierda la ocasión. Si podemos hacer de la misma manera que hemos hecho en las ocasiones anteriores, los que habéis intervenido en esta sesión salís a la mesa porque supongo que la mayor parte de las cuestiones irán dirigidas a vosotros. Y no sé si ya funciona el micrófono. Bien, Robert.
Thank you. That is working. First of all, I wanted to say to Ken how very pleased I am to see the school work, which I've seen published, but I didn't realize you were going to do a presentation on it, so thank you. But you brought up one or two loaded words, in fact, as indeed did José, and I'm afraid semantics matter because that's how we define what we say. And I suppose the loaded word, because you use it many times, was the two of them was contemporary and modern. And obviously it's very important to you. You finished off by talking about being contemporary society and contemporary construction culture, which is actually something we're all in. I mean, that's what I call an unavoidable state of affairs. And indeed, being one meaning of contemporary is like, that's what we are and that's unavoidable. Well, clearly that doesn't mean anything because that's tautologous. So obviously it means something else. What it generally means, the difference when we use contemporary not as just being around now, or modern as not just being around now, means something to do with style. But I also detect that, well, it means a visual difference. There must be something different from something else, or there's simply no point in saying it. You know, these are difficult words that we all wrestle with, and you call it style. It's a visual difference of one form or another. So I'd be interested in a little bit more about it because you're somewhat in the lion's den at the moment. So. I'm going to put you back in it again because I think it's a very important subject, and actually José brought it up as well, used exactly the same word but in a slightly different context.
Yeah, so okay, for me, when I talk about modernism or being modern or being contemporary, it's true that semantics is playing a role here. I'm not at all talking about style, because I'm not really interested in the modern movement as a style. What I am very interested in what the modern movement tried to do at that time. So we were in a Western context where there was the upcoming of a certain middle class who all needed a certain kind of standard of living. So it was about bringing up standards of living for the many which before did not have access to this kind of living. And we're talking about London in the 19th century, very dirty, Brussels, like open sewages just running through the city. So I see modernism as a reaction to those situations, like hiring the standards. That's the first thing. The second thing also, for example, Le Corbusier, Maison Domino, was like the slab and the column structure with the open plan. The reason why he built it was not to have an open plan or a new style. The reason why he built it was because he saw in 1914 Flanders totally destroyed in the World War, and he said it's not possible to build the traditional way all this housing for these people who are now homeless. So we need to find an industrialized system in order to be able to cater for all the housing needs in a post-war society. So for me, modernism is more about a response to societal needs than about a certain style or not. It was a necessity. It was not an aesthetic choice. also in the post-World War build-up after the Second World War, we see the same principles. We built in boxes, very rational, very efficient. I agree that it's not the most beautiful architecture, but in that time, in that era, it was the best way to build. And I think now in our contemporary era, we are facing very much the same problems as the modernists try to answer, but we're facing them even in a bigger scale, because now our world becomes global, so we see migration from Africa, we see the issues arising in African cities, in Latin American cities, a lot of needs. So how should architecture respond to that? So it's that concept of modernism that I take, the efficiency of building, leaving behind the author of architecture. Like, I'm not interested in being an architect as an author. I'm interested in to contribute to my society. So for me, that's a bit modernism. Of course, we should not be uncritical. Modernism does not respond well to climatic and ecological issues in terms of the use of materials, steel, concrete, glass. Those were very badly performing buildings that were built often, not all buildings, but a lot of buildings. So I think our job today is, in a contemporary society with shrinking budgets, with rising needs, with a booming population worldwide, I think we have to reinterpret that modernism and make it work in our society today. Which, for example, how I interpret it is, yes, we make clear lines, 90-degree angles, slick finishing, but in a cheap, efficient, ecological way. We choose the right materials for the job, which our society needs today. So that's a bit my interpretation of modernism.
In fact, everything except for your penultimate phrase, everybody here would agree with.
Except for my?
My complicated English. For your penultimate phrase, in other words, the second phrase before the last, when you started to talk about slickness and right angles, I think everyone would agree with you. Because actually when you started to talk about that, you started to talk about a deliberate choice of visual appearance. Which is also known as style.
Because it's easier to construct 90 degrees angles than, for example, detail finishing and decoration. I really like traditional architecture. I think it should exist. There should be craftsmen who deal with it to keep the patrimonium that we have built. And for certain projects which have the right budget, the right context, I think it's the best architecture possible. But as a young office, without contact to rich projects, I always have to deal with projects which have a lot of need and a very low budget. And that's where our vision of architecture comes from. I'm not saying everything in the world should be like that, but I do believe there's a research to be done to change that modernism from steel and concrete and style and non-performing buildings to really well-performing buildings with good materials, ecological materials in our society. But that's not, like, our society is very diverse, so I really enjoy seeing the heritage buildings, the other kind of buildings in the rural areas for other types of clients, and I think that's really good that exists because it's super beautiful and very performant buildings. But that's not my world.
So I don't want to dominate this, but just one last point. There is also an argument to be said, particularly for Pissé and rammed earth, that actually right angles are not the best form. I've worked on them too, and actually, very often right angles are not the best form, but that's a whole other subject.
Well, is this working?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think I made it clear when I said what I think about tradition, what's my notion of tradition. And I think the use of the word modernism, well, it's just not possible for me because I believe there's something ideological behind the modernism, which has to do also with the industrialization, the production of products in series. It's a world that I hope might be or should be ending, because I think what you search, what you aim, is an alternative to that. And on that we agree completely. So I simply cannot use the word modernism because of that connection. Okay, if we talk about semantics, this is my statement.
Yo solo quiero añadir como historiador una pequeña nota porque yo entiendo todas las implicaciones que hay en todo lo que se ha contado, aparte de que, como tú has dicho, también es una cuestión de presentar al cliente, a ciertos clientes que valoran esa idea de modernidad muy específica. Pero, claro, todo ese discurso de que el movimiento moderno, que es como llamamos aquí al modernismo, el movimiento moderno fue un movimiento de preocupación por las formas de vida de las clases bajas y demás, pues es un discurso parcial. En gran medida es una construcción ideológica que se nos ha vendido a través de historias de la arquitectura, pero fue así, a veces fue así y a veces no fue así. Muchas de las realizaciones del movimiento moderno son casas para ricos y otras cosas que no tienen nada que ver. E incluso, mucho antes del movimiento moderno, ya ha habido una construcción social que se ha preocupado por las necesidades de las masas, ha sido socialista, ha habido muchas viviendas sociales en el siglo XIX, algunas de muy buena calidad. No está de acuerdo el micrófono. Algunas de muy buena calidad, como las francesas, e incluso dentro de la propia Holanda hay todo un movimiento fantástico que es la Escuela de Ámsterdam, que son viviendas sociales para obreros, o por lo menos para gente de ingresos bajos, pero realizadas...
La reconstrucción de Lisboa.
Por ejemplo. Entonces, el movimiento moderno nos ha vendido la idea de que ellos inventaron eso, cuando no es así. Y no solamente no es así, sino que hay muchas otras formas de verlo. Y cuando realmente se ha construido esa vivienda masiva a gran escala, que ha sido los años 60 y 70, los resultados han sido tan desastrosos en todos los sentidos, no solo estéticos, sino habitacional, funcional, etcétera, que se han dejado de hacer, sin dejar de hacer viviendas sociales, pero se han dejado de hacer en ese estilo. Entonces yo creo también que usar ese término, que entiendo que es estratégico en gran medida, usar ese término implica aceptar una parte de ideología que creo que no es necesario aceptar.
I have a question for my colleagues. It's about the presentation. Where does the city live?
Yes.
I was very challenged and surprised, and very happily surprised, but I'm very interested to understand about how the public space is appropriated by homeowners, especially because in the traditional space, vernacular space, you could see that in an easier way. But in a urban space, there's a constant challenge. Because if that was, for example, in the center in Lisbon or in Porto, in big cities in Portugal, that would be a huge fight. Yes. So how do you overcome that challenge? Or you are requested by the people itself or by the city?
All of them. Because we have this area just in front of the house, which is stoep. I use the Dutch word stoep. Mm-hmm. There are very famous examples, like in Amsterdam. They usually have a few steps, and then you have a stoep. And it's yours. So it means that this first, the difference between 80 centimeters and 120 is yours. It's not always the case, but it happens often, and there is a great, people like it very much, so there's a great appreciation of that area. So also in newly built areas where you have a master plan, this can be part of the master plan, that you have a plot that has to be bought by the house owner, but you built a house 1 meter behind, and then 1 meter of the new owners will stay public space. Usually the builder builds the stoep, or also the government can pave it, and afterwards it is up to the people who live there to use it. So it's common, it's not something that I invented.
Sure. But you have to close the street, because with the sidewalk...
No, you don't close it. So you have to keep it open.
Yeah, but the cars do not pass on the street, on some streets, some that you showed. Some
Oh, but it also happens where you have the streets where the cars go, and then you have pavement where people live, and then you have this stoop.
Well, I think it's a matter of culture. It's a different culture, I believe. People in Netherlands have a completely, well, you could explain it better than me, but I think comparing it with a southern city, southern European city, it's difficult because they have a culture of community and the views, this public space, which is different from ours, I believe, no?
Yeah.
Yes.
But we have
It's
the
not
same on the
in the
patios.
city, in the
You know,
city.
the patios in...
Yes.
The patios have that in Lisbon.
Yes,
Yes.
because
Oh.
it's enclosed.
Exactly.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, it's not without problems, but it can be when you have a beautiful bench that you have to lock it with a bicycle chain so that people don't take it.
Okay.
Like you have to lock your bicycle. So it's not without problems, but it's no big deal. But I realized you do not find it very easily in other countries. And it's not that our climate is so wonderful that you always sit outside.
You have exactly the same thing in a narrow street in Alentejo.
Benches.
Yes, eventually it can happen.
Yes.
You know, and there's a cultural tradition of people standing outside the house and talking with the neighbor,
Yes.
etc.
Yes.
It's we made a huge dam in Alentejo region, which is Alqueva, and one of the villages was completely moved and rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but the modernist architects didn't resist to improve the streets, so they made it larger, and they simply killed this effect,
Yes.
you know?
Well, I think that... Oh, sorry.
No, it's important to look, as you did, at the construction, the building, but also to the way how people live, how the people use the public space, what is the culture of the place. I believe this is tremendously important.
I think there's also another aspect of it, that is, how do you present yourself to your street, to your city, to your village? That is, if you own this place, or even if it's rented, you present yourself over there. So the way you put your things, maybe pumpkins, maybe plants, maybe whatever, or just your bicycles, but there is something. You have this business card is a very strange word there, but we translate it different, visitekaartjes. But you show yourself to the city. So that's an opening. It's not just a closed door that you have to ring. You don't know who's behind it. So that's an aspect of it. Without using it, you present yourself.
En cierto modo es como cuando aquí los patios delanteros de las casas a veces tenían, o generalmente hasta no hace tanto tiempo, el patio delantero estaba abierto, ¿no? Esto yo, bueno, por lo menos en mi zona de Toledo era así. El patio estaba abierto y lo que había en el patio estaba completamente orientado a ser visto desde la calle. Toda esta decoración de geranios con flores, las parras normalmente dando sombra, un pequeño banco, todo eso estaba pensado para esa relación con la calle y era, como dices, algo parecido. Sí que es verdad que ya nunca están abiertas esos patios en caso de existir. Ya no están abiertos simplemente porque ahora ya si está abierto alguien te lo va a robar todo, ¿no? Entonces, pues eso ha cambiado, sí, no funciona igual.
Well, don't distrust people so much.
Más comentarios, ¿alguien quiere comentar sobre?
Bueno, estaba queriendo hacer un resumen un poco de lo que se ha hablado en estos 2 días. Y entonces tengo aquí como una contradicción. porque se ha hablado del arquitecto como facilitador, de la transversalidad profesional, de la colaboración en el proceso, de la gentrificación, de la sostenibilidad, de la despoblación de las zonas rurales, y todo eso son problemas muy actuales, que no hablan de la arquitectura vernácula, sino de la arquitectura en general. Y me parece que es una clave para cómo entender la arquitectura vernácula en este caso. Pero también se ha hablado de un sistema económico que no permite las formas tradicionales de construcción, unas administraciones y unas leyes que no son sensibles a la forma tradicional. Y entonces hemos visto algunos proyectos de obra nueva, que al fin y al cabo es... Los que hemos hablado que somos estudiantes es un poco lo que nos ha preocupado más, ¿no? Y hemos visto copias formales, sobre todo los proyectos en Estados Unidos, hemos visto formas modernas con técnicas tradicionales y luego maestros artesanos al margen de la profesión de arquitecto que solo se dedican a la restauración. Entonces, mi pregunta es un poco, ¿cómo veis la nueva obra y cómo puede responder a todas esas demandas sociales y a todas esas preocupaciones del arquitecto o del arquitecto que salimos ahora de la carrera desde un punto de vista de la arquitectura tradicional?
Voy a hacer, antes, completando tu resumen, que es fantástico, voy a hacer dos puntualizaciones, y es que los artesanos que hemos visto no solo hacen restauración, también tienen encargos para obras que son nuevas. Y otra puntualización, que no hemos visto ninguna copia, hemos visto simplemente arquitecturas que toman como referente arquitecturas de distintos estilos, que pueden ser más tradicionales o pueden ser más de estilo, podríamos decir, más de vanguardia, pero simplemente han tomado como referencia arquitecturas diferentes, lo cual no quiere decir que sean una copia, simplemente porque desconozcamos o no hayamos estudiado tanto la referencia no significa que sea una copia, ¿no? Igual de diseño actual hay en una persona que le gusta el clasicismo que una persona que le gusta una cosa más vanguardista, ¿no? Esas eran las dos puntualizaciones que quería hacer. Ángela, que es buena amiga, y no sé si las compartes, creo que...
I hope I understood your question correct. But I just want to say it helped me somehow to realize the world is really big. There are really very different ways that you can work on very different problems. The projects that I work on, they are without any, most of them are newly built. It's social housing or cheap houses for sale that are built with concrete and that don't have any possibility to have much beautiful things in there. So you try to give beauty by making it in the brickwork or in the way the windows are made, because we need bricks, so you don't do anything extra, you just make the bricks more beautiful. You need windows, you need to know a lot about how the window frames are made and how that detail goes, but they are all industrial. I like the work very much where you have these beautiful houses that Jose showed. It doesn't mean that one is conflicted with the other. There's differences. There's just a lot of difference. So it helped me not to try to have one big truth and work with that. There's a lot of truths, and you can work with a lot of things, if that answers your question.
Creo que es algo característico quizá del futuro del arquitecto, el pensar en esa diversidad precisamente y ser un profesional que se aleje de esas restricciones ideológicas y empiece a pensar en qué se necesita en cada caso. Porque realmente muchas de esas, incluso esas separaciones radicales, ¿no?, entre qué es moderno, qué no es moderno, qué es tradicional o qué no es tradicional, muchas veces viene de lo mismo, ¿no?, de esa voluntad de restringir la realidad, que muchas veces es mucho más compleja y rica que las etiquetas que le podamos poner, ¿no? un contexto puede requerir distintas soluciones y al mismo tiempo tus respuestas van a tener que adaptarse al contexto, quieras o no, o te gusten o no. O sea, porque, y a tu cliente, y al presupuesto, y a todas estas cosas que hemos discutido. Otra cuestión es que uno tenga pues, unos valores, que tenga en mente una referencia, un ideal, que pueda alcanzar en mayor o menor grado, que puede tener que ver pues, con esa voluntad pues, de utilizar unos materiales más locales, de recoger la cultura de un lugar, de recoger los usos y costumbres de la gente que va a vivir en un sitio, de desarrollar los procesos de la construcción implicando a la comunidad, de trabajar con los oficios que dan forma a la arquitectura de un lugar, de que esos oficios como parte de esa cultura puedan sobrevivir gracias a que nosotros mismos los estamos promoviendo en nuestras obras. Todas estas cosas pueden ser nuestra voluntad. Alcanzarlas o no ya pues llegarán en distintos grados y podrá realizarse o no según dónde estemos trabajando y en qué condiciones, ¿no? Eso está claro. Eso creo que todos somos conscientes de ellos en esta sala, ¿no?
Sí, yo hacía mi pregunta un poco por una preocupación personal, más que nada por la situación socioeconómica, ¿no? Y al fin y al cabo no creo que muchos de nosotros vayamos a tener muchos clientes con el bolsillo lleno para encargarnos un edificio en el que podamos ¿no? como dedicarnos expresamente a hacer una cosa muy elaborada, sino estaba pensando más en un tipo de arquitectura para alguien con un presupuesto bajo, que puede ser, por ejemplo, cualquier poblador de un pequeño pueblo de Castilla que en vez de querer hacerse la casa, o sea, tirar su casa antigua porque cuesta un montón de dinero restaurarla o reconstruirla, hacerla nueva, o tendiendo también a pensar en la ciudad de una manera, con unas técnicas de construcción un poco más sí, sostenibles, no gentrificadoras, etcétera, etcétera. Con esas preocupaciones hacía mi pregunta.
Yeah, I think if I understand everything correctly, as a young architect, as I said already, I'm also in this situation where you want to do things you believe in, which means you want to go back to working with your hands, with crafts, but you're also in an economical situation myself because I'm very young, from a new generation. So I don't have the kind of projects which allow kind of experimentation with professional craftsmen and so on. So I think what young architects can do, like there should be diversity of architects, but at least that's what we're trying to do. That is to try and also maybe change the way that the project is set up in order to be able to allow for these crafts to be inserted in a new project with a limited budget. So that's something that we've tried already a lot of times, and it works, it keeps on working. Let's see how it goes in the future, is to open up the construction process and to attach this kind of knowledge transfer idea, sensibilization idea to the construction process. We hardly, in our innovative projects with earth or local materials as a construction material, I don't think we ever done a project where we didn't do, at a certain point, a workshop where people come and help. So it's like craftspeople. When you have traditionally craftspeople, there were always students with the craftsperson who was teaching, who was learning the trade. So we're in fact doing that, but incorporated into the budget of a certain construction process. So that allows us to lower the budget, at the same time sensibilize for ecological materials, and at the same time make buildings with crafts materials, local materials. So that's a bit, but it's still a research. I don't have like a model that works everywhere, but right now this model has worked for us in our projects. So that's a bit, yeah, that's a bit our approach on that.
I just wanted to add something. It's interesting because on the last 10 years, there has been a rising around the world of this type of events. And people, especially students, but also young architects, sharing experiences, how to change, how to see, how to build new houses, but with a different approach. And what is interesting is that it was possible also through what we have been discussing here, is to look at architecture, local architecture, but not with always a modern look, but also considering cultural values, social values, and contextual and environmental values. 2 years ago, there was a world competition organized in Ghana, and I thought it was interesting because it was just for young architects. Probably some of you heard about it or even compete. It was, the prize was to build the house that you run for. You had to build something for $5,000. I was part of the jury, and we had to evaluate more than 100 projects, which was not an easy task. But it was extremely interesting to see the different approaches. And it was also extremely interesting to see, because it had to be a sustainable building. It has to, those are the premises that you had to run. You had to use local resources. You had to use social, taking in consideration social relations and local materials. And I was shocked with some of the projects, because on some cases people were importing models. So you would see a Mies van der Rohe house in the middle of a community in the north of Ghana, and with the glass, everything in concrete. Everything in rammed earth instead of concrete. But then with a huge glass, with a really, really warm weather. But then, and I was shocked to see that some of the people, they were not even aware of the social relations. You could never have such a huge glass, because people would not walk, so they live in different ways. And that's the issue. It's the imported models. And finally, people are realizing that if we always work with imported models that can be imported from continent to continent, then we are not taking into consideration how people live, how is the context. I arrived yesterday from Dubai, where I went to teach conservation of earth and architecture. And people told me, how is it possible to teach conservation of earth and architecture in Dubai? There was more or less 15 students. And it was really interesting, because they were coming from very difficult regions, from Libya, from Syria, from Egypt, from Palestine, and so on. But they were interested in finding solutions for heritage, not for the big cities, but for heritage, and how to use local buildings, and how to use local knowledge, and not always to count with experts that come from outside. Okay, this is to end. So just to say that each case is a case, and it's important that we start working through also relating with regions, how people work in certain regions, and not always think about importing historical movements, but also how people live there, and how can that be adapted to the context.
Well, if I can add something, intentando de responder a tus ansiedades, que comprendo muy bien, creo que no hay un pensamiento único, eso es muy peligroso. Yo creo que los estudiantes tienen que tener capacidad crítica de observar lo que los profesores le están diciendo y cuestionarlo, y hacer sus propias, digamos, sus propias conclusiones, ¿no? Porque ustedes observan el mundo probablemente mejor que nosotros, que estamos ya un poco viciados en algunas cosas, ¿no? Y entonces ustedes tienen probablemente una visión más pura, más realista de que es el mundo hoy. Entonces creo que esa capacidad crítica es muy importante. Creo que ustedes deben observar. La observación es extraordinariamente importante. Este señor Driehaus, que patrocina esta conferencia, este premio, estuve siempre insistiendo en eso, que es la necesidad que tenemos de cuando llegamos a un lugar, a un proyecto, sea él un enorme palacio o una cosa pequeñita en un pueblo, la necesidad, la obligación, la importancia de observar. El arquitecto tiene que comprender el lugar, cómo vive su gente, lo que pasa allí, todo eso es muy importante. Y no hay, como decía Maiana, cada caso es un caso. Y por tanto, al mismo tiempo, hay una otra palabra, además de observar, que es digamos, la capacidad, la posibilidad de escoger. Es una cosa que Leon Criar nos enseñó hace ya mucho tiempo. Hay un libro que tiene precisamente ese título: Arquitectura es una escoja o una fatalidad. Pues yo pienso que tenemos que tener la posibilidad de escoger, ¿no? La diversidad es otra palabra que es muy importante. Yo creo que es en esa diversidad que está la riqueza de nuestro mundo, ¿no?
Yeah, I just wanted to... Today, much more than yesterday, that there is less of a polarization between tradition and modern. I thought yesterday there was way too much emphasis on either being traditional or either being modern, and not enough attention being paid to what was in the middle. I think today we hear a lot more about, the need to be respectful of tradition as well as of modernity, I think. But I just wanted to add that I also think it's important not to set up this opposition between the local and the global, because of course things play out in a local context. But globalization is a reality, and a lot of the diversity that we're talking about and that we're appreciating, and some of the projects that we see, for instance, fantastic projects in Africa, they are the result of globalization as much as of local identity, I think. So I think it's, I think in this whole debate, I think there needs to be much less polarization and much more looking at the overlaps, the places where people come together and where, something new is inevitably created.
Well, in fact, I think that all the lectures we have had here and all the projects we have had here are really different points in this space in between, and which are proposals, architecture, urbanism, building techniques, which are, even the building techniques, which are also continuously evolving and exchanging new references and new integrating new updates, and some of them are needed, some of them are chosen, and I think all of the works we have seen, all building works, architectural works, urbanism works, for me, are all interesting references to have in mind, as a reference for my own work, and and they help me to learn new things or new ways to solve issues that I will also find. And I agree with you that we should focus in all that we have in common, which is a lot, I think, and which and in all that we think which is missing in most of what is produced today too. And I don't know if you want to add something more, or
No, I think that's true.
we could finish here the debate.
Yes. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.